People think a shaman's armor, the hoig, is just a for show, a costume. They are wrong. That armor does not protect your physical body. It's the only shield your soul has against spiritual attacks, generational curses, and the malice of things that should not exist in our world. At the time, my older brother was newly initiated shaman, young, arrogant, and eager to prove his power. One night, we answered a call from desperate family in a remote rural village. The moment we stepped across the threshold, the putrid smell of the house hit me like a physical blow. Inside lived a young, bedridden man, his weary wife, and a frail, crumbling grandmother. My brother, playing the part of powerful shaman, prepared his drum, adjusted his heavy leather hoig armor, and sat in the center of the filthy room. He began to beat the drum, fueling the ritual with his own energy. He hadn't called upon the ancestral spirits yet. He was facing his darkness alone. As the drumbeat thundered, a shaman's sight opens. They see what ordinary people cannot. My brother's movements suddenly grew violent, his gaze fixed upon the dark space beneath the bed where the paralyzed man lay. Following his fixed stare, I focused my own inner vision. My blood ran cold. Under that filth-ridden bed, a strange, grotesque creature made at its den. It was the size of a man's forearm, but its head was as large as a human palm. Ragged, matted hair, large, floppy, pointed ears, looking precisely like a disheveled, filthy Dobby from the Harry Potter movies. But radiating pure malice, it moved with unnatural speed, and every time it shifted the putrid stench and the room grew suffocating. My brother, with all his youthful arrogance, thrashed his drum, attempting to drag the creature out by brute spiritual force. But the imp was not afraid. Instead, it mocked him, leaping from bedpost to bedpost, cackling in silence as dodged his spiritual blows before vanishing back into the shadows beneath the bed. Trying to fight the entity he, with only his own power had completely drained my brother. He sat in pool of his own sweat, gasping for air, the drum resting on his lap. The frail grandmother gasped, completely awestruck. Protect us! What a powerful shaman he is! She whispered, her eyes filled with revenge. She had no way, knowing how close we had just come to losing the battle against the hidden top B. After talking a moment recover, my brother realized force was not the answer. He changed tactics. He began a slow, deliberate beat on the drum, focusing his energy to speak directly to the entity. He directed his gaze back under the bed. Tell me, you grotesque thing, he demanded, his voice low and dangerous. Why have you infested this home? Why are you possessing this man and making him waste away? The grotesque imp peeked up from the darkness, its massive eyes glittering with twisted amusement, its jagged, pale teeth exposed in hideous grin. The wife of this family, it hissed, its voice like dry leaves scraping on stone. She is the one who called me here. She feeds me every day and let me alive here. Hearing those words as a touche, my mind immediately went to the darkest of places. A young wife must be modernizing her own kind of karma. She probably hired the dark shaman to curse her husband to steal his money. But the truth was far more pathetic and far more disappointing. There was no cures. It turned out the young wife was simply absolute pinnacle of human laziness and neglect. She never cleaned the house. She let the unwashed dishes pile up for days. She threw scraps of food and trash directly onto the floor beside the bed. That stubby was born of fifth and decay. It survived on the putrid environment, feeding on the food scraps and the rotting debris she left scattered everywhere. The lazy wife, without knowing it, was nourishing a demon every single day, cultivating its power within her own home. My brother stand by the mundane nature of the evil, blessed future. Fine, you are being fed, but how did you first gain entry into this house? Where did you come from? The imp cackled again, pointing its long, wretched finger toward the far corner of the room. I came with the carriage. I followed its scent into this home. When I leave, I will only go if I can take my ride with me. We turned to look where the creature pointed. In the dark corner sat an old skeletal-looking wheelchair. I was confused and asked the grandmother, "That chair over there, where did it come from? Who owns that?" The grandmother sighed heavily. "That old thing, my granddaughter-in-law found it at the local hospital months ago. Our son's ankle was little sprained, so she thought it would be easier for him to get around should she brought it home." Suddenly, the grandmother let out gasps so sharp that seemed to tear the very air. Her eyes went wide as the realization slammed into her. "Why, it's true, it's all true. Ever since you brought that chair into this house, my son's ankle didn't get better. It got worse. Then his whole leg started hurting. Then he was paralyzed. Now he's bedridden." Every time became clear what wheelchair had been used to someone who died or someone who had been consumed by a powerful sickness. Their suffering, their spiritual spirit had clung to that cold metal like rust, and the imp had followed dark energy directly into their home. And then the twisted logic of karma closed its trap. Imp was deliberately keeping the husband paralyzed. Why? Because the more time he spent bedridden, the filthier the house became, the more food the lazy wife threw on the floor, and the better the imp's life became. He was the king of their filth. We dragged a cursed chair out of the house that same day, and my brother successfully severed the link, banishing the imp back to the void. The young man eventually recovered his strength, but let this be a lesson to you all. Listen to this from your cozy homes. Clean your house. Wash your dishes. The next time you are too lazy to clean up that trash, remember the imp under the bed. You never know what the kind of entity you might be nourishing with your neglect.